Hey guys, Leigh from Bloody Brush Studio here, and today we're going to be painting a Plague Marine from the Death Guard. This model that I'm painting today is based from a commission job that I'm doing for someone, and basically what I'm aiming to do is paint it in a very quick, very fast way. So I had a little bit of a think about this and I thought, how can I do it? And I've come up with a bit of a scheme that is quite easy to achieve, uses very few paints as well, and uses a lot of the basic range. So I start by spraying the model Death Guard green, and I do that after I clip it off with sprue, clean it, do all the normal sort of work and gluing it to a base. And it is using, like I said before, the Death Guard green spray. And then after that, you'll obviously see how I go through the model. So some of the main colors you're gonna need are colors that you'd find pretty much if you got yourself the Dark Imperium set to paint up the Ultramarines and the Death Guard. So I tried to keep the color palette as basic as I could. So the things you'll need are a Death Guard green paint as well. You'll need Retributor gold as one of your main colors, that's for painting a lot of the trims. You'll also need Leadbelcher. You'll also need Bugman's Glow, Ushabti Bone. You'll also need, just having a look at some of my colors here, Cadian Fleshtone and Rakarth Flesh as well. So the Cadian Fleshtone is for painting anything that's, as you'll see in the video later on, what I use it for. And the Rakarth Flesh for some of the cloth. Some of the washes you'll need is Agrax Earthshade, and you'll also need Carroburg Crimson. Carroburg Crimson is actually a really good color for this as well. It's one of the sort of colors you probably wouldn't normally have either, but I do recommend getting that. And you'll also need some of the technical paints as well, so Ryza Rust and Nihilakh Oxide. And one of the other colors I forgot as well is Gawthor Brown for some of the wood. However, as I'll say in the video later, you can use pretty much any brown color to do some of the wood paneling in this. So anyway, sit back, just watch the video, see if it's helpful as well, and let us know if you also want to do any more videos in the future. If you have any ideas with what you want me to paint, if you want me to do something that's a bit more in depth, or if you want to just do tabletop quality stuff using minimal color palettes as well. All right, sit back and enjoy. Okay, so the first color we're going to be using is Retributor Armour. Now this color, after you give it a good shake, normally I wouldn't use this one if I'm painting Death Guard, but because we're going to use such basic colors on this, we want something that's going to really stick out. So that's there. Get a bit on the brush, put it onto the wet palette. Get a bit there. If you want to thin it down a bit, you can. Now we're just going to hit all the gold or brass areas. And normally I do use brass for this, but because I want to go bright, I want it to stand out because we're using such basic colors in this piece. It's going to stand out really well, especially once we do a little more detail work later on. So we just move it around there. So you can see we hit all the main areas. Now the big thing about this is it does not matter if you go over. That's the great thing about this. Like as we can see through here, I'm pretty good with the brush and keeping it relatively neat, but some people aren't. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all. That's the number one thing that people should really keep in mind, is you don't have to be super neat when doing this the first time around. So I'm nearly finished there, but you know, if you end up going over in one of the areas, don't stress about it, because you can always fix it up with Death Guard green later, which is the color that we've sprayed this. So let's just have a look at some of the other areas as well. Like to simplify things as well, paint the knee, which is just in here, using Retributor gold as well. Now, if you do thin the paints down, if you have a wet palette, it helps, and if you just add the tiniest drop of water to it, it'll help as well, and spread the paint over. Now you can easily do 2 coats on top of this to really block the color out, make it good. Now, especially because we're going to be, see, if you go over here, doesn't matter. As you can see, I've sort of accidentally, although on purpose, gone over here. This will be Leadbelcher later. Doesn't matter, you can go over it, so you don't have to worry about being super, super neat. As long as we get it in there, and because of the armor edging along here, we can just sort of get into there, so you don't have to worry about being super neat in this area. That's the great thing. That's the great thing about all these models, actually, is you don't have to worry about being super neat. On the backpack, you know, I'm not picking out a huge amount of details, so just here, we're going to knock this out because this actually looks pretty good when you paint it gold color. These bits up here as well. So if you really want to, you can paint the whole area gold, and you know what? I'm going to do it just for this bit here. I'm going to leave most of the backpack Death Guard green spray. Just get around there. Make sure you get inside the ball as well. Very good, very good. Going through here. Now some of the other areas we definitely want to hit with this is you got the, where are we? Other shoulder pad here. So you definitely want to paint that. Now I've been painting the internals of these ones silver, so that's what we're going to leave. Okay. Where are some of the other details here? So the cable joiners here, or the cable links, I've been painting them as well. So get a bit on there. But just remember, it doesn't matter if you go over on these as well, because you can always neaten it up with the other colors later. We've got to make sure you get the rim of the armor along here too. And just through there. Doesn't have to be perfect, but as you can see, it gets on. Now, this knee pad for this one in particular, you can leave it green if you want, but for this one, just for simplicity, because that's what we're going for, just paint it all. There's going to be lots of other green areas here. So let's keep it as simple as we can. Because just remember, the goal of painting like this is just to get it ready for that tabletop standard. So you just pick out all the main areas. Now there is a little maggot there. He sits on the knee. Paint over him, doesn't matter because you can cover that later. And there we go, all through there. Now what I tend to do as well with the grenades here, I'll just paint them all in gold, and then I'll pick out some areas in silver afterwards. So the goal is, when you do things like this, is just paint all the bigger, larger areas first, because at least that way you've got color on them. You're not having any of the base coat show through, and you're good to go. And there's some of the main areas. So I'm going to fill the rest of these in now, and we'll come back to it in a little bit. Alright guys, so now I've finished the Retributor Gold on the model. Now, I'm going to point out a few different things here, which I'm hoping you can see. Now, I haven't been perfect in a lot of the areas, and some of the Retributor Gold has spilled over. So there's a little bit here, a little bit under here, some in the corners here, on the greaves here, and here as well. As you can see, a little bit has also come up along here on the Bugman. This doesn't matter, but what I'm going to show you now is just how I quickly then go back and neaten that up. So just get a little bit of the Death Guard green, get it on your wet palette, and then just go back and identify those areas that need to be green, and just start to touch it up. So this is where you can just be a little bit neat. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Don't have to get everything because the ink will actually cover a lot of that. Here, there's a bit here. So when we do the big wash on the model, that will actually hide a lot of that sort of stuff. So there we go, just getting it out across there. Just working it across. And where else are we? Into the other bit of the pool from there. So yeah, in these little bits, it's come over quite a lot. So we do want to neaten it up. But if anything's just sort of broached over into a recess, that's okay because the wash covers it. Got a little bit more in here. And that is the great thing about using washes. It hides all your mistakes. As Bob Ross says, they're happy little mistakes. There we go. So I'm just going to go through, identify any of those extra areas in there that need to be covered up by the Death Guard green, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next color. Okay guys, so the next color we're going to move on is to another metallic, because that does cover up a large area of the model, and that is going to be Leadbelcher. So I've already given the pot a bit of a shake. Now I'm just going to apply some to the wet palette. There's going to be quite a lot on this model as well. There's a lot of silver areas. Just to help make it flow a little bit, you just get the tiniest pinch of water onto your brush and then mix it in, because you really want this one to flow. So first big area is the sword. So we just get that on there. And we apply this area. Because we've thinned it down, it applies really, really smoothly onto the blade. Now, if I didn't do that, a lot of these metallic paints can get quite, and for lack of a better word, sticky, and it makes it really hard to push the paint across. And that's what you don't want when painting these, because that's also what takes up a lot of your time. It makes the paint quite thick as well, and it doesn't seem as smooth on the model. So you just want to make sure it covers it. And you don't want any of the green base coat showing through on this. So make sure what you do is you look into all the little nooks and crannies of the model. So just in a little bit here, it's still green. So you want to make sure that goes on. So spend the time looking at this. So if you look at the back of the blade here, no paint, so we sit there and cover that. And through doing that as well, I've seen I need to add a little bit of Retributor Armour to some of the hilt. So what I can do, because I have the wet palette, is I can always jump back and forth between these things, especially when painting metallics. It's fantastic. And there we go. It's a problem fixed. The great thing about having a wet palette is any paints that you do put on there and any left over will stay there for most of the day, or even into the next day, which is fantastic. So that is the blade done, nice and easy. So, because I know I'm going to be painting a lot more, just a little bit more on there. And the next is the chainmail sitting on front. Now this is where I can actually cover a lot of this here. There we go, automatically covering up the Retributor Armour from before. Very, very easy to do. So we keep moving along the model there. Now the reason why we probably get quite a bit onto your wet palette and thin it down quite a bit, not too much where you can actually see the paint break up as well. That's when you know, especially with metallic paints, that you put too much water in there and it actually starts to break up. You know you've thinned it down a little bit too much there. But that allows us to really maneuver the paint around, get into all the little greaves in here, which is really important when you're painting chainmail. There you go, that pretty much covers it all. Nice and easy. Now some of the other big areas we've got along here is the bolt gun. Now I tend to just cover the whole lot first, because there's a few other little details that we will do through here. But yet again, you want to make sure that that paint is thinned down and stays thinned down, so it gets into all the little crevices, because there are a lot here. Now you'll notice that there's some of the wood finish here as well. Doesn't matter if you cover that, because we will go over it. The big thing at the moment is just to make sure we get the coverage on the larger base colors. Now, if I was painting this to a more advanced standard, like some of my own personal Death Guard, this model is actually for a commission, and I'm just putting this video together to sort of show the client if he wants to carry on with the paint scheme in the future, but also just to show everyone else out there what I do and how you can do it nice and easy. So my personal ones, yeah, a little bit more effort and work into them, a little bit more detail, but this will still look fantastic. So I've already painted a few of these up, and had a mate around the other day and he loved the paint scheme, so he thought they were quite well painted. I was like, yeah, this is pretty basic, but it just goes to show if you paint the whole model properly, it does get enjoyed by everyone, and it's something you can be proud of. You can take to tournaments, you'll get good paint scores as well. Like this will definitely get you good paint scores as well. Now we want to make sure we get into all the nooks and crannies here. Make sure all that green is gone. It's going to be silver. So make sure you investigate your model as well. Just have a look, because it'll save you in the future, especially if you go to a tournament or you're putting into some sort of painting competition or something like that. The judges will look for those little bits and pieces to make sure that it's all covered. Now, a little bit of silver went onto the hand here. I can always go back in the previous steps like I did before and fix it up with a bit of Death Guard green. Very, very easy fix. As you can see here, we want to make sure we paint the pistol grip. There we go, there's a little bit of the trigger guard here. And then what I do to make sure I've gotten everything is I investigate the model. Yep, there's a bit more here. A bit more here. Now remember, always look at the box art as well, because that'll help you know if you've missed any areas. So that is the bolt gun done. We've got lots more little bits and pieces that we've got to do. So up along the back here, notice on the back of the legs, this will just help break up the monotony of the color on the back. So you don't want it to just be green. Like, you can leave it if if you're feeling a little bit lazy like I do from time to time. But what you want to do is make sure you paint that, because you will be a lot happier in the end. Now the other one here on this particular model, which you'll all have if you have the starter set, it's a little bit hidden, but that's okay. Just remember, if you go over, use the Death Guard green at the end. You'll see also there's a lot of cabling here. Now any of the flesh cabling, do like I do, leave it, because that's going to be covered by another color in the future. Anything else that is exposed, let's get some paint on that. Now remember, if you go over it, you're going to be covering it with another color soon. You want to make sure you get it from all angles as well. And what we do is we have a look and see if there's any more tubing hanging around. So yep, up on the front here. And then we get that. And as you can see, that automatically starts to neaten up the gold that went over it. So that's what we want to keep in mind when we paint this model. And it becomes quite a cathartic process after all, searching for all this stuff. Now that that's done, the last bit to do with the silver, especially if you just see any other areas you want to neaten up, like I have just then. Always go back and have a look and see if you want to neaten stuff up, or if you really want to break up some detail on the hilt here. I just paint that silver in there just to break the colors up a bit as well. So if you see things like that that you want to do, definitely do it, because it'll make your model look much better. Now we've got a little bit of paint that we've got to put on the backpack here. So just picking up the exhaust fumes. There we go. Just making sure we get it from all angles on there. Very good. Very good. Now yet again here on the grenades, just paint the rings. That's that done there. Now, if you want to, so here we go again. There's the tubing along the side here, so just be neat, but you don't have to be super neat, because you can always cover it up. That's that done there, and through there. And remember, if it goes into the little recesses of the paint, don't stress, because it'll be covered by the wash later. And that's that covered. Now if I want to, there's the tubing down on the bottom half of the side bits of the exhaust here. You can just paint those too. And it breaks up all that gold color there, which is good. Then we have the bits up on top here. There we go. That's just going to break up all the green on top. Makes it really cool. There we go, especially when you wash it. Okay. And the very last bit we got to do is just the symbol here. So remember, you can always paint these whichever way you want, however, because I'm keeping it simple, I'm just painting it silver. And I'll show you some of the things you can do to liven it up a bit later on in the process. And there we go. So that's all the silver done on the model, as far as we can see. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm just going to have a look at the model, do my investigation again. I like to call it a bit of an investigation, and just see if there's any silver bits I've left out or that I need to touch up. And then also in that stage, I can see if there's anything that's gone over where it's supposed to be, and I just need to neaten it up a little bit. And I'll use the Death Guard green yet again for that. So there's probably one or two areas where I see it, and I'll need to do it. But otherwise, that is all the silver on this model. Alright guys, so the next colour we're going to move on is Bugman's Glow. Now this is going to be all the sort of fleshy areas. Now you can use the bone colour first if you want to, but just because of the way that this model's designed, it's going to be easier to do the Bugman's Glow and then paint on the bone colours afterwards, just because of where they are situated on the model and the fact that the teeth cover this stuff over. So it doesn't matter if you're so messy with this one, at least you've got your flesh colour on first. So Bugman's Glow is a really good one to use as a base, and then you can actually build up on it for fleshy colours later on, which I can show when we do some more advanced techniques on these models. But just if you want to do for the base sort of colours and just get them tabletop ready, Bugman's Glow is the way to go. So let's get a bit of that shaken up again. Now this one I really need to shake up, and use it from here. My pot's getting a little bit old, but that's okay. So we get it onto the palette. Now you don't want to have a whole smudge of this on the model. You want to water it down as well so it flows nicely, because remember there's a lot of raised areas on the tentacles and things on this. So as we can see here, he's got a nice big one coming out of his stomach, so let's start on that one. Now this, because the teeth are going to be painted over later, doesn't matter so much if it's messy. It's all good. So there we go, we just start picking that out. There's maggots in there as well, which is cool. Now you can make these as disgusting or as basic as you want, but the method I'll show you for this one, really basic to do and looks gross, which is what you want for Nurgle. So there we go. Getting these big tentacle painted out. You just wonder with these models how much of them is actually human still. I love these new Death Guard models. I've got my own army of them, which I'm taking across to No Retreat 7, which is going to be pretty sweet. But I've been playing them a lot back here as well, just for fun. And I only wanted just to do a starter set force of these guys from the new box, but just through painting them, I've just been having such a blast. Thought, you know what? I'm doing a whole army of them. And it kind of just, yeah, grew out of control from that. So as you can see here, a lot of this tentacle bleeds across into the leg. And I've just noticed a couple of other areas I need to touch up as well. So that's my investigation checks still happening. Making sure there's areas on there that I need to sort of repaint. Now, there's a sort of bit in the leg here. Now you can leave it how you want, or like me, you can actually paint it with the Bugman's Glow. So it's almost like a bit of stretchy skin on his leg, which is bleeding across to everything. And this will just give your model that bit of extra life. So you could paint it silver, I guess, because it sort of bled into the cloak a bit, but I don't like that. I just want to make it like this big icky bit of skin coming through. Now this guy has a lot of tentacles on him. So there's more that sort of reach around the back here. Now, like I said, it doesn't matter if you're not so neat on these as well, because it'll just still fit with the vibe of the model if you do paint over and you don't manage to get it covered by the Death Guard green or a Ushabti Bone because of all the teeth and whatnot. So there we go, that's on there. Now, when you turn the model certain ways, you can actually see a little bit better. So just always do 360-degree checks on these models and make sure you cover all the areas, because the more you capture these, just the better the model looks in the whole big scheme of things, because that's how it's intended to be painted. Now I've bled a little bit of this over into the gold here. That's okay, that's going to make it look awesome, I reckon, especially once you start adding the washes, because that'll actually start to join the colors together. Now I've got a little bit to go in here before I move on to the next bit, and there we go. Now the next bit on here is the fleshy tubing. There we go. Now that covers up and neatens up some of the other areas there. Then we want to get it down into there. And this automatically just starts making the whole model look so much neater. Now, because of the mold lines, we just need to paint those in there. You can actually just get into here because it looks like big stretchy skin in there. That just helps cover that up a little bit. So as we can see, we're really getting there. There's just a few other little bits and pieces on here that we need to get covered. There we go, just up around the back. Now, on the inside of this fleshy tubing, you do have space to paint the silver if you want to. Do this if you want to. I generally don't tend to. I tend to make it like it's part of the living organism that's living inside their bodies. So you can do it, it's up to you. It's just that little bit of extra detail work, and it might just start to eat into your time, especially if you have to paint this stuff quickly. All right, last thing we've got left is the tongue. And it doesn't matter if this is neat or not, because you're able to paint over this. So we get it right into the mouth there. You're going to be covering it with a bone color anyway, so it'll look fine. And the last little bit that we've got to do is on the gun. So that's got a bit of stretchy, fleshy skin there. Now, like I said, it doesn't matter if this bleeds over a little bit into the model, onto other stuff, especially with these bits, if you're not super neat with it, because it'll look good, like it's all stretchy, yucky skin. There pieces that I need to cover up. And there we have it. Pretty quick, pretty easy. That is all the fleshy bits coloured, all the little tentacles. So I'm just doing my checks now. Now, as you can see, there's a little bit there, so let's get that as well. Let's use up the last of the Bugman's Glow. That's a tentacle coming down there. There we go. Now we have that painted as well. And that is how you do that. So some of the other areas I have identified on some of my other colours. So just the little spiky bits coming out here. I'm going to paint those Retributor Gold as well. And there's a little bit of green I've got to chuck into here as well to neaten that up. So I'm going to do that, then we'll move on to our next colour. Okay guys, the next colour we're going to move on to now is Ushabti Bone. So this is going to cover all the bone areas on the model, and there's quite a lot here. So we've got his big horns, the big horn here, the teeth in here, a little bit in the teeth in this shoulder pad here, where there's looks like there's a plague bearer coming through or Nurgling. And then we've also got some claws coming through here. So there's quite a lot on here, and probably a little bit on the backpack here, so I'm going to treat that as a skull. Now, if you can see here, we also have on here, this is mostly flesh, and it's got a little bits of bone sticking through here. So what we'll do is we'll end up coming back to that, or we might even just paint the bone first, then paint some skin over the top of that. So I'll see how we go when we do it. So I might just do a little bit of a base coat and of bone in there as well, and then just might neaten it up later. Now, if you can also see through here, some of the other additions I made was a little bit of Bugman's Glow in through here, so that way it matches up with the back there, and touched up a few areas around here as well. Now, the other little thing about this model as well, and you see these all over the Death Guard models, is some of the cracks in the armor. So what you can do in here as well, before we move on to the Ushabti, is just fill that in too. So that'll look good once the wash goes on, and that's all through there. So the next bit is getting the Ushabti Bone. As you can see, I haven't used a huge amount of colours yet. It's only been 5 colours so far to paint this model. And these are the colours that most people have, which I reckon is really, really cool, especially if you want to start, you know, knocking armies out and you don't want to spend too much money on getting different colours. So anyway, through here, let's get this done. So you will have to do a couple of coats on this to really make the colour stick out, especially because you want the paint to flow. And my Ushabti Bone's getting a little bit old. Did pick up a new pot today, but I do want to use up the rest of this one. Where are we? Just start to get through there. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff here. I'm actually just going to paint over that for now, because it's going to make it easier to make sure I get the paint where it needs to go. And then before I do any of the washes or anything, I will then repaint that little arrow in again using Death Guard green, or unless I decide to paint it with something else. We'll see. But you'll find there's probably a few times on a model, if you really want to get it looking good, that's what you'll have to do. You actually have to paint over some stuff to make sure you get the paint in the right nooks and crevices, and then you'll find that it actually looks much, much better if you do that. And then go back and neaten it up, of course, as well. And we've got a little horn there, so it's only got one just starting to sprout through there. Now, I'm painting this all with a medium brush as well. You can use whatever brush size you want, whatever you feel comfortable painting with. But at the moment, because these are all just sort of base colours, I am using my medium brush. Okay, through there. Okay, as you can see, it's all starting to build up. So one of the things you want to make sure as well is make sure there's no pooling of paint on any of this, because then it won't dry correctly and you have like a big glob trying to dry as well, which means it takes a long time to dry. Now let's pick out some of the horns here. Now it doesn't matter if these are perfect either, because you can either go over with the Death Guard green or just let the wash hide it. I'm all about hiding stuff, so there you go. Alright, there we go. Now, are there any other horns? No, we've got the skull on the back here. So just make sure you don't rest your fingers on any of the drying paint. So that's just one thing to be mindful of when you do this stuff. If you end up getting one of those Citadel painting handles, yes, I do recommend it, because it keeps your hands from touching wet paint. Okay. Try and be as neat of this as you can. that's that done there. Now, I've got quite a few little bits and pieces of teeth to paint here, so you can move to a smaller brush if you want. I'm just going to try this with a medium brush. I've got a pretty good point with it. And then you just sort of drag it down along the tooth. So there we go, there we go. Doesn't matter if this is neat either, because guess what? When you apply the wash, it'll make it look good because it hides everything. There's a little tooth just up on here as well. So make sure you paint those little details. Like that little tooth there can be easily missed. And then it just won't look as good. There we go. Getting all those teeth painted. So there we go. Now that's all the teeth painted. Now you can leave it like that if you want, but my suggestion is wait for it to sort of dry, go and paint some of the other areas, and then go over it again, because it'll leave you with a really strong color. And that's what you want at the end of the day. You want a good, strong base color because it makes the rest of the model just pop a lot better. Now, he's got a lot of teeth here as well, so there we go. Now that's already neatening up some of the other bits and pieces that Bugman's Glow covered earlier on. Now there's a little tooth in here as well. Let's try and get him. There we go. Now a few people that are shaky and all that sort of stuff, that's cool. You can still do this. That's one of the best things about painting these models as well, and especially this way, is that you can avoid or not worry too much about the shaky hand syndrome, because I know it looks like I've got super steady hands here at the moment, but that is just practice. That's all that is. I used to have the mega shakes on the hands as well. Okay. Back there, need some paint. All right, there we go. So that's everything covered at the moment. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to do a second coat on the top of that as well. So that way it really blocks the color out and makes it look much, much better. And we'll come back to you once that's done. All right, guys, so what we can see here now is that I've applied the second coats of Ushabti Bone on the model, and we're good to go with all the bone. That's done. But what I'm going to show you now as well is using some Death Guard green. And I've just got myself a small layer brush. Just up on here, there's a little bit of arrow that comes across, which forms part of the actual helmet of the model. So we get a little bit on here. And what we're gonna do is actually just neaten this up. So I just move the paint on there. Yet again, this doesn't have to be perfect either, because the wash will hide it all. So as long as we go up there, covered. Right, now while that's drying, we just move to the back. So this will probably need 2 coats, because Ushabti Bone is quite a light colour. That's the back done. Just make sure it's nice and neat. That's also what we want to make sure. And as you can see, that's probably still drying a little bit. Now, if we covered that now with, like, just imagine it dried and left it like that, and then we covered it with the wash, it'd work. It'd look fine, it'd be good to go. But like I say, and what I always want everyone to do, is to make sure that your block colors are neat and they're strong. So remember, thick doesn't mean a strong base color, okay? It means you've applied several thin layers of paint over it, and it's really made sure that it's defined. So yet again, I'm going to go over that because it'll be sort of dry now. Just move across. There we go. Make sure that that is all neat. And there we have it. It's all tidied up. So we'll start moving on to the next lot of colors. So it's just a couple more little bits and pieces that we have to add on here before we can apply the wash. All right, so now all we have to do, since we've got all the main colors down, is start to pick out a few more details before we apply the wash. And these are the things that you sort of need to do to give that life to the model. So the first thing I'm going to do is pick out some details that are on the gun. So there's a little bit of wood finish here, and there's also some cloth holding the 2 magazine magazines together for the gun. So what we're going to do is first we're going to use Gorthal Brown. Now you can use any brown. Now anyone can have brown in their collection. So I just like Gorthal Brown for this one because it's a nice light wood sort of colour. So I'm just using a small layer brush for this one. You can use your medium. I just had the layer brush in my hand. Apply it to your wet palette. And I'll show you guys how to do a good wet palette nice and cheap in the future if you want as well. Wet palettes are a godsend. They're so fantastic. But anyway, what we want to do is just, make sure we get it across in here. Now get it into the details as well. And make sure you paint all the wood finishes in there. So get it into the recess as well of the wood grain. Now I can show you all how to do proper painting of wood grain in the future, but we don't need it for this right now. So there we go, getting it in. Make sure you do the other side of the gun as well, the bolt gun, because it'll just make it look so much better. Now there's little bits on the front here that you need to paint the wood as well, because otherwise it just won't look right. And there we go. And just up in through here as well, the top bit of the wood grain. There we go, that's all the wood done. So the next bit we're going to move on, once we get all this close, so remember to always close your paint lids and that when you're done, is Rakarth Flesh for the cloth. So Rakarth Flesh is a really good cloth colour as well. So besides painting flesh, it's also good for painting cloth. And especially the way that, I'll show you how to do it. So you just get a little bit, chuck it onto your palette. Now, the thing about the Death Guard models is that they have a lot of cloth keeping things together. And Rakarth Flesh is just a really good colour to use with the Death Guard on that, because you can actually make it dirty if you want. So you build it up as a sort of nice brightish white colour, and then you can really pull it back with dirt, and if you really want to go that path, blood and grime and other things. So yeah, it's just a really, really cool colour to get that effect across. Okay, now you want to make sure you get all the bits and pieces. Now this is just behind gun. Probably a bit hard to see on camera, but that's okay. There we go. And that is that bit done. Now there's usually, like I said, a lot more on other bits and pieces of the models. But for this one in particular, it's just on there, so that is fine. Now the last detail we're going to move on to is using Cadian Fleshtone. Make sure you give this one a good shake as well. And it's just going to be on this bit of the head here. Now, you're probably thinking for a dead head, Cadian Fleshtone is too much of a live colour for this. Well, one, Cadian Fleshtone is probably the colour that everyone is going to have if they have a flesh tone. So if you're painting your Space Marines, if you're painting anything human, this is the colour you're most likely going to have. So I'm going to show you how to work it. Now, just make sure you don't have any hair. Like I had a little hair on my brush. Make sure that there is not on there at all. And then the next thing we do is we're just going to paint this all over the fleshy bits here. Now there is a method I will be showing you guys when we start doing more of this model on how to make this tone back a lot. And it's just by applying washes. There's also a lot more advanced ways that I can show this to you, but there's no real need to, especially if we're keeping stuff basic. That's why I want a little bit of my wet palette has some hair on it. It's a bit annoying, isn't it, when that happens? Does anyone else out there get annoyed when they paint their models and they find that there's like a random hair that gets stuck on it and you didn't notice, and it's dried into the paint as well? Sometimes it doesn't matter how vigilant you are on those things, it just seems to somehow get through. And it's also if you have hairy dogs around the house. We got an awesome dog here, and he is a little bit hairy though. So his hair, especially after giving him a bit of a pat, just likes to get everywhere. So that's something you have to be vigilant of as well. Now there we go. That's the skin covering the grenade on the back there. So we pretty much got everything here. Okay, now because I've just seen it, there's a little bit on the side here for the tongue. So I'm using my Bugman's Glow yet again. Great thing about having a wet palette is your paint stay wet, and you can go back and use them if you want. Don't have to crack open the pot again if there's anything left over. Just on the other side, because it's not done either. And there we go. Now, this model is pretty much good to go for a wash. There's other smaller details you can start to pick out if you wanted to. There's a whole bunch you can actually do to this model if you wanted to really sort of take it to the next level. However, because we're trying to do this to a really basic standard and get it done quickly, we're not going to do anything else to it. So there we go. Now make sure all the paint's dry before you apply the wash, because if you do that, you're actually going to have your wash and your paint mix bleed, and that doesn't look good. It's not the sort of look you want to go for. Utilize this time as well while it's drying to just have a look and just see if there's anywhere where you miss, because these models are so highly detailed these days, not back when I first started, and they were very, very basically done. You want to make sure that you've covered everything, because the more detail you can pick out and the neater you make it, the better these models will look, especially on the tabletop. Like, you could almost just base that and then play with it if you really want to. Like, you'd be a very bright, nice looking Death Guard model, but that's not what we're going for, okay? You know, if you really wanted to up your detail, you'd start picking out the detail of like the Plague Bearer that's coming through the shoulder pad. There's so much more you could do with these if you really wanted to. However, there is no need at this stage. If there's anywhere where some of the paint's still showing through, use this time to fix it up. But we're probably about 90% dried at the moment. We'll just wait a little while longer just to make sure, and then we'll move on to the wash. All right, now we move on to the next bit. Now, the model is dry. We're good to apply the wash. Now, this is just going to be straight out of the pot because this is easy. Now, what you can do is just use here to control how much wash goes onto the brush and then therefore onto the model. However, since this is going over the whole thing, we're just going to put it on essentially. One thing you will have to be wary of, and I'll say this right now, you will have to be wary of pooling. Now, if the wash starts to settle and pool into areas, you need to remove it. So you have to remain vigilant. You can't walk away for the hour or so it takes for the wash to fully dry. You have to just keep an eye on it. So if you're batch painting, just keep an eye on stuff. Make sure it doesn't pool. Just use your brush to soak it up, or a little bit of tissue, and just dab the corner of a tissue, and that'll just soak up that excess wash. You want to make sure you have a wash brush as well that's nice and loose, that can absorb as much of the wash as it can, and then easily apply it to the model. So for this, we're using Agrax Earthshade. If everyone remembers the old Stirland Mud, it is essentially just that. It's a brown wash. It's going to cover everything nicely. It's going to start to mute the green. It's going to mute the gold. It's going to age the bone. It'll make the silver look a bit older as well. So this is a fantastic, very versatile bit of wash. So this is just going to go all over the model. You want to make sure it goes into all the recesses. As you can already see there on that bone, it looks so much better than it was before. And glad I painted that little bit green as well, because it looks good. And this is just going to go everywhere. You can see it's already starting to mute the gold. Makes the silver look aged and worn. There we go. Just get some of that deep down into those recesses there. Now you want to make sure you hit absolutely everywhere on this model, because you will notice it if you do miss an area. And it is very, very easy to miss areas on here as well. It'll really stick out. And it just makes it annoying once you're ready to move on to the next piece. You spend all that time drying, and then you see a little area that you haven't covered. You've got to do it and then wait for it to dry. It is very painful when that happens. So there we go, we're just applying it all over. Really work it into the back of the model as well. I usually tend to, if it's pooling in an area where there's a gap, just give it a little blow, and then it gets rid of that for you. Okay, to the back of the leg. Okay, everything is already starting to look so much more detailed. This is really starting to bring the model to life. As you can see, when we applied over the grenades, and also especially back here, the flesh tone is starting to mute a little bit, which is good. It's looking a bit more old, it's looking a little bit dead. And that is exactly what we wanted. But there's still a little bit more to do on that little grenade piece though, to really give it that life. Because remember, it's a plague grenade as well, black grenade. So it can't just look, you know, basic, it's got to look a little bit special. Okay, there we go, in around there. Fantastic, this guy's looking the piece now. To there, See, some of these areas where you think, oh, it doesn't matter if you hit it, do it anyway, because you'll notice it, and then once you start doing this stuff, you'll really start to pick out your faults in a model. It's just one thing you do when you start to get better at painting, which you all will do once you practice and all that. When you really want to start pushing yourselves, you'll notice little things like that, especially on some of your older models, as you go back through your collection and go, how can I improve that? How can I make that look better? So there we go. Now we've pretty much hit most of the model. Now what I'll do is I'll get rid of the wash brush, and I'm just going to get one of my smaller brushes now, so probably my medium layer, and I'm going to start to have a look and see if there's areas I missed. Now I have missed the back of the skull here, so I'll just get that done quickly now. There we go. Then what we're going to be looking for is just areas that we've missed, and any of the excess wash. Like there's lots of excess in here, which would eventually start to pool. Use that to fill in some of these other areas. You'll find that there is actually quite a lot left over. You'll probably find there's quite a lot of areas that you have missed, especially the fingers, those areas, backs of weapons, little tiny nooks where that brush couldn't fit and it didn't flow properly. And this will just help push everything around where it needs to go. There. Try and identify any areas as well that are really pooling up with a lot of ink, or if there's a lot of it stored there, then use it to come back and fix up other areas of the models. There's a lot in the back here. There we go, just use it to work into that. There's not a lot on here either. Use it to work into that. There we go. Economize your paints, guys. Economize everything when and where you can. There we go. Now that is pretty much the entire model done. So this will take about an hour or so to dry. If you're smart with it as well, you're probably batch painting models, so you'll then go on to your next lot of models that are waiting to get a bit of love. And that way you can always kind of go back and check on these things and make sure there's nothing pooling or nothing going wrong. Now there's just a little bit here where it needs some love. There we go. So remember, try and make sure that you hit every little piece in here, because that's what will make it look good at the end of the day. You want to make sure it's all covered and it's all good. Now I can't seem to really notice too much more. A little bit in the back there. Wasn't much, but it was something. That's the model covered. So that's going to take an hour to dry, and when we come back, we'll start to pick out some more details. There's a few more washes that actually need to go on this model, but they're going to be a little bit more controlled, and that's what's going to give this thing a little bit more life. Because this can be pretty much tabletop ready at this stage once it dries. You just need to put your basing on however you decide to do that, and it'll be good to go. However, we want to sort of up that game utilizing really basic methods and really basic ways, so that way you're really proud of these models when you throw them on the tabletop, and hopefully they might even win you a painting award or two. So we'll see you back in a minute. Alrighty guys, now the ink has finally dried, or the Agrax Earthshade wash has dried, and there's two more washes we're now going to apply to this model. So this is the time-consuming process at the moment. So the first one we're going to apply is Athonian Camoshade. So this is sort of like a deep green sort of color, and we're going to apply this over the armor to make it just that little bit darker. So this one, you can even just place it there onto your palette just to really control it, and start to put that onto the green armor. Now you don't have to be 100% neat with this. It's okay if you go over some areas. It's not required to be 100% neat, even if you go over some of those teeth there. That's all good. Here we go, we just keep applying this in there. Now this does not take long to do at all. Okay, just working it in there, around the back. So you want to make sure when you do this one as well that you do focus it, because you might lose some of the areas you want to work it into. So let's go over the here. Now I actually put this over the silver as well to give it a bit of a green tinge. Let's go the back of the arm, in through here, just much. Remember, it doesn't have to be super neat or anything. There we go. Up the back as well. And there. Alright, next is over on this side. There we go. Into there. Get to the greaves here. Like there. So this is just going to make the armour come out much more green, which is what we want. Just into the back there. Into the back around here. Onto the backpack. Doesn't have to be 100% neat. Doesn't matter if you go over that silver at all. It's not going to make a huge difference to the colour. But it will to the green though. Just make that green really stand out. Backs of the legs here. Try and vaguely avoid the metal if you can. There we go. Back of the leg done. Now just onto the front of the leg, just in here. Get all that in there, a little bit there as well. This leg here. Get in where you can, try and avoid it. Okay, just there. At the back of the leg here. Best thing is, it doesn't have to be 100% perfect, just as long as you get it there. Alright, now that is that done there. Now, Cadian Fleshtone here. Now, if I put the Athonian Camoshade on it as well, that'll just start to make the skin look a little bit dead, like it's starting to rot, a little bit green. There's a few other things we can do to it, which would be a bit more advanced, but we won't need to do that. Now, that bit is done. Next, what we want to do is start to make the tentacles look a bit gross. So the next colour we get in is Carroburg Crimson. Pop that lid there. Then all we do, we just do this straight out of the pot. Just start to layer it onto that. What this does is it turns that pink into a real sort of reddy pink, which makes it look gross. Just work it up into there. You can just put it into the little bits and pieces in here. Now, if this bleeds onto the other colours there, that doesn't matter. Just onto the fleshy bits here. Now this model's really starting to take shape. So simple to do, and it just looks incredible. Just up to there. Around the backs here. Because if this essentially bleeds out onto anywhere, it just makes it look a little bit purple, like it's bruising the actual armor itself, or it's bruised the metal. Bit on here as well. There we go. Just a bit on the tongue. There we go. Now this is almost the model complete, but there are a few other little details we'll do as well, and most of these just involve washes and dry brushes. We'll come back to you when that all dries. Alright guys, so now that the washes are all dry, we're ready to start adding a few extra details just to really make the model sort of pop a bit. Now, really cool paints to use, Nihilakh Oxide, so let's give that one a go first. Now this is to represent all the things that are starting to rust, so here we go, and I'm just going to use, well, I probably might use a small brush for this one. So, get it onto your palette. Okay, there we go. Now, with this one, you got to really think about where you're going to put it. You can't just chuck it anywhere. So, let's just say out of the piping here, I'm just going to put some on the inside there, just to show that that's where a lot of rust is building up. Now, underneath rivets is really good. Don't have to be 100% neat with these inside little rivulets. Now, just on top here as well. And in there. So there we go. That's already starting to give this a bit of life. Just anywhere as well where you think water and condensation would have started to pool, and you can start to put it in there. As you can see, that's already starting to add some colours in now. You can slide it along the base lines along there as well, and just anywhere else here. Now, because this is armour here, you can sort of creep it up and along here too. There we go. So now we just got to find all different areas to put it. Inside all these bits here is a really good idea. Just inside there. It doesn't have to be perfect. Can sit also on the outside of the model. You don't have to be perfect with it either, because the way that dries just makes it look pretty cool. Just do down like that. So if you do it nice and light, it makes it look like it's really rusty. If you put it on sort of thick, it's like it's building in certain areas. So as you can see, some of these areas I'm doing nice and light. So these thick areas are done. And then I can just sort of drag it over. Not much on there. It really mutes it down in the colour as well. Chuck them into the grenades a little bit as well. Just nice and light. Nice and light on the back there as well. A little bit in the gun, because this gun would be quite old and rustic as well. Okay, just in there, just like that. Shoulder pads. Just in here as well. The three spots, that'd be a bit rusty as well. So just any of those areas, a few more on the rivulets here. Now another really good spot to put it is in the knee guards in here. Just in there. And also in the cracks in the armour here. Just in there. In there. Now as you can see on the... I'll show you how you can do a few things here. So into the chain link. So that's the first lot of rust that's starting to form on there. Let's get a bit more going. Let's get a bit up on here. Some in there on the helmet. So I'm just running along the backs there. Alright, now this guy is really starting to come to life without having to do too much work. Let's go into here as well. There we go. That is the rust done. Or that Nihilakh Oxide. That's the oxidization process of rust starting to form. You know what, let's put a little bit of on the backpacks here. And just into there. Just into there as well. That looks pretty cool. Now, the next bit is stuff that's actually rusting. And for this, we're just going to use Ryza Rust. So we get that. Now, this is a dry paint. And just use an old brush for your dry brush, or if you do have one of them, you can use that. So you just need a bit of a dab, put it onto your palette, and then you can try and get most off on a bit of tissue. So I've got a bit of tissue here to my right, probably your left. And that way you've only got a little bit left on there, that's all you sort of need. And then all you do is just dry brush it across. And it looks pretty good, I reckon. And you can do a little bit on the gun as well. You don't need to do much on there. It all comes out pretty good. Just make sure you hit the back side of that blade as well, because people do look from time to time. And if you really want to just add more, you can. You just build some areas up. Use your finger to get it off. There we go, that looks pretty gnarly already. An old rusted blade. So pretty much there we have it at the moment. That is the model virtually complete. Now there is one other bit I'll also do to this with the Ryza Rust. So let me just get rid of all the excess water out of that. There we go, let's get back on. It's just here on the chain link as well. Just drag that over. Now with the blue in the recesses, it makes it look like it's really starting to rust up. There we go. So what I'm going to do now is pick out some little other details like the maggots, and I'm probably going to leave the eyes for this guy, but he is virtually done, and I'll also be adding some Stirland Mud to the base as well. but he's looking pretty sharp right now. Alright guys, so what we can see here as well is I've just picked out some of the maggots with Rakarth Flesh, so just reusing one of those same base colors. And once that's dry, I'm then going to apply just some more Athonian Camoshade to that, just nice and light, and then that will be them done. However, now Stirland Mud is being added to the base, so I just got to scoop it up, and we can apply this quite liberally on here and just start to push it around the base. It takes a little bit of getting used to on using these new texture paints, but I think they're fantastic. Don't worry if you get it on the model, it'll just look like they're standing inside the mud. Doesn't matter if you get them on them that much. These are supposed to be quite messy miniatures. It's part of their background. Just try not to get it further up on the model if you can. I'm just using a sculpting tool at the moment to push it across. I know GW have a tool as well that you can use. Can use a brush if you want, but I just recommend one of these instead. Okay, pushing that across. Just make sure you don't see any of the green base lying about afterwards. If you do, if you really can't get it in there, that's okay. Just get a bit of Agrax Earthshade or some other color, and once the Stirland Mud is dried, just throw a little wash into those recesses as well, so that way that can hide that for you. There's lots of little ways you can sort of hide your boo-boos. Okay, pushing that in there. I always find between the feet to be the hardest bit to get them. And there we go, we're starting to get there now. About 90% done. Pushing all that onto the base now. Make sure it sits a little bit over the base now. There's a lot of mud on the back of the foot, that's okay. It does suit these models quite well. Now that's starting to dry, so that's pretty much everywhere on there, but there's a few other little bits and pieces I am going to be doing to these models in regards to the base. So you can get a little bit extra and sort of dump it onto some of the areas. To make it a little bit thicker. And then what you can do is actually start to push it around to make little caverns and holes and things like that. Make it just a little bit uneven, because when that dries, that's going to look really good, and that's where we're going to be playing around with it, just to add a bit of extra, a little bit something extra to the bases. So here we go. It's all on there now. This is going to take a solid hour, maybe 2 hours to dry, and only a little bit more work left to do on it. So during this time as well, whilst you're waiting for it to dry, you can do things like pick out further details, move on to some of your other models that you need to get done, etc, etc. However, you just got to be careful not to disrupt the drying of the base. That's the big thing with these models. But so far he's looking pretty sharp, and I'm pretty happy with this paint job, especially because it hasn't taken me that long at all to do. So we'll see you guys once the base is dried. Alright guys, now that the Stirland Mud has dried, there's probably still a little bit there, but that's okay. I've actually made some indentations here as well, because that's where we're going to put some Nurgles Rot as well, just to make it a little bit more icky along here. So what we're going to do next is get the Ushabti Bone. So we're still reusing those colors over and over again, as you can sort of see. So here we go, just grab a bit. And then what we're going to do is put it onto the palette here, sort of work it into the brush. So I'm just using an old small base brush here. Work it into the bit of paper there and start to dry brush it across. So this is nice and easy here. So I'm not doing anything too special in regards to this at the moment. It's just to get that all on there. And that's looking pretty good so far. A nice basic paint job on that. Alrighty, see that's really starting to build up, which is good. Doesn't matter if you get a little bit of this onto the green. You can either one, cover it up, or two, just leave it. Really does not matter too much. And just keep going around the base, working it around. There we go. So you want to make sure you cover all that Stirland Mud. With this now, just build that up around there. So if you really want to build it up, just keep working the one area and then I'll build it up. There we go. As you can see as well, I already painted the rim of the base black to go with that. Now, the next bit we're going to do, now you can build this up over several layers. Let's get a bit of an older brush here as well. Is use Nurgles Rot. So this is one of the other technical paints that we use, and this is just adding a little bit extra now to the model. And I quite like Nurgles Rot because it's thick, it's icky, it's looking gooey. So here we go, just get a blob of it into the brush and just pop it straight in like that. So it makes it look like he's walking in some radioactive waste. And I've done the 3 dots there as well because that is the marker Nurgle. And there we go. Now you can also pop this in other areas around the back if there's any indentations, like just in here, looks good. Around the back in here. And let's find one other spot. Let's just say here. So this will just add a little bit more to the model. And with that, we are pretty much done. That is a Plague Marine of Nurgle. So we're just waiting for that to dry now. You can actually build this up over several layers as well if you want. And it'll just make it look a bit thicker and give it a bit more depth, because when that dries, it'll actually go down. But overall, I think not too bad a job, especially if you don't include the drying time. This probably takes about an hour or so to do. And you can batch paint these as well to help with your time. So always do your checks again, just make sure there's no other bits and pieces left over, and that will be that. So there we go, guys. Just let us know what you think of that. If you want to see me do some more models as well, let me know, especially in the comments. There's lots of other things I can paint as well, just to, you know, show you guys how I do things or how I tackle a paint job, especially if you want to do it quickly, or if you want to do it, take your time and do something a little bit more complex. I know quite a few people want to see my Dark Elder and how I paint them, so I'll look at doing a video for that as well, but that will be a lot more time consuming and a few more advanced techniques. But if you want to see some more basic stuff, let me know and I'll make them for you. Alright guys, thanks heaps and I'll see you later. Bye.